Tonight on CFTK-TV News, the Kitsilus First Nation managed to initial a major treaty. The Kitsim-Kalim First Nation also managed to do a similar thing, and pushback is still emerging from a notable salmon farming related video.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Good evening, I'm Cale Baslett. Here's what's making news in the Northwest and beyond. It was a monumental few days as two local First Nations initialed treaties. It's the start of at least a 4-year process that will include a community vote before they are ratified. Nonetheless, it was time to celebrate for the nations that worked hard for 30 years negotiating with the government to get here. First to initial their documents was the Kitsilus First Nation. CFTK-TV's Jaylene Matthews was there.
On behalf of our community, I would like to welcome each and every one of you to the homelands of the Kitsillas people.
The event began with a welcome as many gathered to witness the initialing of the modern treaty, whose negotiations first began in 1995.
The process of gathering for this historic occasion is to ratify and formally sign off on this treaty between Kitsilus and the Canadian federal government and the provincial government. For Kitsilus, it provides legal recognition and retention of lands, resources, and monetary compensation.
Chief Glenn Bennett pointed out the opportunity that comes with treaty.
First of all, our elected leadership desire to attain self-reliance, sustainability, society that generates economic wealth from which meaningful employment is reached. To be specific, economic growth in the private sector that creates wealth both to individuals as well as to the government of the nation. We have identified through this treaty some resources that may be developed, whether it be in the forest industry, the mining industry, through our water resources, fisheries, etc. To achieve self-reliance now, it will be up to us to identify how to engage in the business market to do this.
Many elected officials were in attendance. Minister Murray Rankin emphasized the differences in the modern treaty process.
It's a major step. It's a made in BC treaty process. We should be proud of the work that we have got to do and are doing. We've made some big changes to the treaty process, which gives me the hope, as I said, that we'll see more of modern treaties in the years to come. In 2019, we, Federal, Provincial, and First Nations Summit created the Recognition and Reconciliation of Rights Policy, a mouthful. We just call it the R policy. Changed a lot of things about modern treaty making. And of course, our government was the first government in North America to introduce and implement the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, which has had another significant change to the way we work together. And I think we have in front of us, if we do get this treaty ratified, as I say, a fundamental change in how we do business.
The treaty was initialed by all parties and will now move to the ratification process and community vote. For CFTK-TV News, I'm Jaylene Matthews.
Next, it was the Kitsim-Kalim First Nation's turn to initial their treaty. Both nations negotiated their two treaties together, which resulted in two distinct agreements. The BC government said this ability to work together demonstrates the family ties and collaborative spirit of the two nations. CFTK-TV's Jaylene Matthews has more.
First Nations community members and elected officials came together at the Kitsim-Kalim Community Hall this morning for the initialing of their treaty.
The constraints of the Indian Act system hurt us and hindered us. We needed more land, our historic lands. We needed more authority to look after affairs ourselves. We needed greater influence over the area as a whole. And we needed the best for our people. We wanted better to improve health, education, economic opportunities, housing, better infrastructure. Those were some of the goals that Kalim, our members, our elders, our youth have expressed over the past couple of decades that I've been involved.
Chief Negotiator Gerald Wesley did recognize that the process was not cut and dried.
still. I know for a fact not everybody from Kitsim-Kalem is happy with the fact that we proceeded down this path, but we're finding the way to make the path as accommodating as possible for everybody.
Wesley emphasized co-evolution.
So what would we say about relationships? You've got to coexist. You've got to live together, whether it's a relationship of family, relationship of communities, in this case, relationship of governments. This is a special and a historic day for Kitsim-Kalem. There's no doubt of that. It's not the historic day, but it's one of the ones that will go down in our history books, in our ledgers as to what happened on June 25th. Well, here's one of the things you can talk about, and hopefully our grandchildren and great-grandchildren down the road will be able to flip some pages and they'll see some of the steps and some of the efforts that have been taken.
The treaty was initialed, and so begins the ratification process. If the process is successful, Kitsilus and Kitsim-Kalem will join 8 other nations as the only treaty holders in British Columbia. For CFTK-TV News, I'm Jaylene Matthews.
A Supreme Court trial regarding a notable criminal contempt case that was set to continue in Smithers now won't happen until September. The case was described as a constitutional challenge due to police allegedly abusing power when arresting several people for ignoring a BC Supreme Court injunction that gave Coastal GasLink permission to utilize their pipeline route near Houston. The 3 defendants in the case are Shaylin Sampson, Corey Jocko, and Slato, aka Molly Wickham. The case's conclusion and the court's decision will likely be of great significance in the long run, but everyone involved in it will have to wait longer for it to finish. The BC Supreme Court has agreed to delay a significant and different complex trial involving an Indigenous rights claim involving 6,200 square kilometers in BC's northwest. The 3-month trial was supposed to start in October, but will now begin in March 2025 after the BC government asked the court for a delay. The ruling released Friday says BC and the plaintiff, the Gitnyao Nation, wrangled over expert evidence the nation disclosed to BC, which the government says hampered its ability to prepare for the trial. The court ruling says the size and complexity of the case made it unlikely to be ready for trial by the original date, and the judge agreed to delay the trial for another 5 months. Coming up next, efforts are being made to try and get more people involved in voting. Welcome back. Cowichan tribes also signed an agreement with the federal and provincial governments that could potentially set a new standard for First Nations communities across Canada. It will see the First Nation take back control of its youth and care. CTV's Brendan Strain explains.
It's the signing of an historic agreement between Cowichan tribes and the federal and provincial government. It will see the province's largest First Nation take back its inherent right to self-determination.
It means a lot to our people to keep our family units together, to keep our kids with our families, to learn their language, their culture.
The 4-year agreement will see the federal government commit $207 million, and the province will pitch in $22 million, allowing the Cowichan tribes to establish its own child and family services authority, overseen by a board of directors and a CEO that has not yet been hired.
It's extremely poignant for me to stand here in front of you to try to make amends for a country that has wrought so much harm on people and on families.
The new authority will ensure that if a child has to be removed from their home, that youth will be put into the custody of someone within the Cowichan tribe's community, either with a family member outside of the home or a separate family within the Cowichan tribe's community.
We know that kids are best served when they are connected to family community culture.
We are leaving behind the practice of child apprehension and placements that have alienated children from their families and our community for generations.
Through the new authority, backstops will be established for families facing hard times, such as poverty, inadequate housing, substance misuse, or mental health issues.
This holistic Cowichan approach focuses on enabling family wellness, respecting our children's best interests, and ensuring our teachings and values are passed on to future generations.
It's been a long road getting to this historic point for the local First Nation. Years of negotiating with multiple levels of government led to a vote by the community last November. 83% voted in favor of establishing its own Child and Family Services Authority.
15, 20 years ago, who would have thought that today would happen? Who would have thought that they would have listened to our voice?
Today is a day of celebration for Cowichan tribes. As members say, now the hard work will begin to create a framework that will set its children up for success while maintaining its rich First Nation culture. Brendan Strain, CTV News, North Cowichan.
Outrage has emerged from a group of First Nations as they push back against two famous Canadians. The group said they were insulted by William Shatner and Ryan Reynolds for a profanity-laced attack ad on open-net salmon farming, and they're demanding an apology. CTV's Anna McMillan has more.
Off! Open-net pen salmon farms!
William Shatner isn't mincing a single word.
It's a state on our nation!
This video, starring the Canadian actor, was released late last week by Vancouver Island-based conservation group Pacific Wild. The colorful criticism of open-net pen salmon farming is being slammed by BC First Nations involved in the industry.
For celebrities to make this fodder for social media hits is just frustrating beyond belief.
Dallas Smith is with the Coalition of First Nations for Finfish Stewardship, which is calling out Shatner and actor Ryan Reynolds, whose production company created the video.
We're looking for an apology of just the flippant nature of how their post was put together.
In a statement, the coalition says this is a classic example of rich, elite, removed urban white men overriding the wishes of vulnerable Indigenous communities.
We felt we had to push back a little bit because we've got jobs and livelihoods and real life at stake here.
Pacific Wild, Shatner, and Reynolds Production Company did not respond to our interview requests. Their video is a response to last week's decision by the federal government to push the deadline on a previous promise to phase out open-net fish farms by next year.
Facilities will be expected to make restocking and harvesting decisions that are consistent with the requirement to fully terminate all open-net pen farming by June 30th. 2029.
On its website, Pacific Wild says the farms are harmful to wild Pacific salmon and the species that rely on them, like orcas and bears.
The lack of respect that was shown to our leaders who are working through these issues needs to be stood up for.
Whether you're for or against the practice, he says what this really comes down to is Indigenous rights.
This is about First Nations making choices around what's right for their territories and their communities, and salmon farming happens to be a part of that.
He says the coalition has yet to hear from the actors or Pacific Wild. Anna McMillan, CTV News.
Just a few weeks after BC's provincial election happens, Americans will cast their presidential ballots. As many as 115,000 U.S. citizens live in BC, and many are eligible to vote. CTV's Penny Daflos looks at the efforts to get them involved in voting and the impact on Canada.
Burnaby pub patrons enjoying their Sunday brunch with live music also spotted a number of American flags in the house.
I'm a Texas voter. I vote in Dallas County.
Jennifer Phillips lives in BC alongside these volunteers with Democrats Abroad. The organization tries to connect thousands of Americans living outside the U.S., including north of the 49, particularly those eligible to vote.
We know that it's going to be a fight at the ballot box, and U.S. citizens living abroad can really be the margin of victory. Whether
Joe Biden stays in the White House or Donald Trump returns, there's good reason many Canadians will be glued to the race for the U.S. presidency.
It is a very loud democracy to the south of us, and the issues that bubble up in the debate tend to find their way into Canadian conversation as well.
Issues around soaring housing prices, toxic drugs, and international affairs will feature prominently, and our political leaders are already taking steps to maintain positive cross-border relations.
In 2023, trade between Canada and the U.S. amounted to over $1.3 trillion.
The Prime Minister and his cabinet are going in person to make the case for mutually beneficial relations rather than Buy American.
To maintain influence in Washington in various ways and to make sure that Canadian interests remain at the forefront of policymakers there, both in terms of the president's office, but also the office holders in the various institutions around Washington.
Yankees living in the land of the Maple Leaf can register to get absentee ballots and have their say counted in the district with their last U.S. address.
It's a stressful year for a lot of people, and the way that people can kind of feel more in control, especially politically, is getting involved.
Democrats abroad will be holding a viewing party on Main Street in Vancouver for the first presidential debate on Thursday. Penny Daflos, CTV News, Burnaby.
Turning to tonight's weather, the north coast will see some cloudy conditions at a low at 12 degrees. The Terrace-Kitimat area will be home to a few showers while their lowest sits at 13 degrees. And the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District should also deal with a few showers as well, with their high sitting at 10 degrees. On the north coast, their upcoming week will again mainly consist of clouds and rain, while the high switches from 16 to 14 degrees. In the Terrace-Kitimat area, the week for them should also exclusively deal with rain and clouds, plus a high bouncing between 21 and 17 degrees. And in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, the next week or so might have a little flash of sun, but rain and clouds otherwise, and the high moving from 19 to 23 degrees. Checking out the highways now, visit Drive BC for the latest and up-to-date conditions, and as always, drive safe out there. On Highway 16, there is utility work, bridge maintenance, road maintenance work, roadside brushing, construction work, and mowing. Highway 35 is dealing with some mowing and pavement patching. Highway 37 has some paving operations, bridge maintenance, roadside brushing, and more maintenance. Highway 37A has some road sweeping, and the Nishka Highway is dealing with some bridge maintenance. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the View of the Province's highway cams. Still to come, a major presidential debate is coming soon. Welcome back. The first presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is a few days away, and the two campaigns are taking different preparation approaches. While Biden is lying low at Camp David, Trump is holding rallies. This will be the earliest U.S. general election debate ever, and as NBC's Bree Jackson reports, the stakes are high.
A preview of the first face-to-face showdown between President Biden and former President Trump.
Donald Trump is a convicted felon.
Joe Biden's policies have just been devastating for the families that live here in this country.
Both campaigns are pushing to draw sharp contrast on key issues, ranging from immigration to reproductive rights. 2 years after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, Vice President Harris is marking the anniversary by putting the blame directly on Trump.
In the case of the stealing of reproductive freedom from the women of America, Donald Trump is guilty.
The Biden campaign doubling down on that message in this new video, while former President Trump is reaching out to conservative voters on the campaign trail.
Christians cannot afford to sit on the sidelines if Joe Biden gets back in.
The campaigns laying out dueling debate strategies ahead of Thursday, Trump focusing on public rallies.
Continue to remind the American people how much different their life was with Donald Trump in office.
While President Biden holds private sessions at Camp David.
President Biden is going to Thursday night with the American people at the forefront of his minds and how he's going to continue to fight for them.
Both sides gearing up for an intense political fight in what could be the most consequential presidential debate in decades. In Washington, Bree Jackson, NBC News.
With the use of AI rising, many employers are looking to take advantage of it, and the federal government is no exception. A small robot will now roam some federal office buildings, but not all public servants like this idea. CTV's Natalie Van Roy has the details.
Verbrick's endpoints are at the forefront. Federal workers have seen this robot roaming around the workplace.
Members find it intrusive, quite demoralizing, because they have a robot that's, first of all, in their work area, that's doing the work that they are more than capable of doing. And the robot can be a certain health and safety and environment issue, because if you don't see the robot, you can easily trip over him.
The device is created by a company called Global DWS. The owner says they focus on workplace health and safety.
It's been very helpful in identifying and pointing out any readings from temperature, humidity, and air quality, and different indoor air gases.
Yeah, so there's a robot in the PDP-4, which is...
But the robot has a camera, and the union is concerned about surveillance of employees. The company says it doesn't store images and can't identify people. It was used in at least 3 federal office buildings during the month of March. But with the 3-day return to the office mandate only months away, there's concerns that the robot will be used again. The federal government says the devices do not recognize individuals and do not have any ability to spy or track employees in the workplace.
What exactly is being collected in terms of the information that is being gathered? How is it being used? Is it disclosed to any unauthorized third parties?
Natalie Van Roy, CTV News.
And now we turn our attention to the stock markets. The Canadian dollar is up 2/100 of a cent. The price of gold is down $13.60. Oil is down 80 cents, natural gas is down 5 cents, aluminum is down $10.50. In Toronto, the TSX is down 60.11 points. The Venture Index is up 0.76. In New York, the Dow Jones is down 299.05, and Nasdaq is up 220.83. Still ahead, a major anniversary is upcoming for a prize home draw. Welcome back. It's the 90th anniversary of the P&E Prize Home Draw, and now for a look at this year's top prize. Gabriella Panza-Beltrandi has more.
In the West Latimer area of Langley Township, you'll find the coveted prize, a nearly 35-square-foot, newly built home worth more than $2.35 million. And it could be yours if the 1 in 850,000 odds are in your favor. The home is 3 stories and features 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a media room, and a 2-bedroom basement suite. There are fancy new appliances and lots of green space in the back.
It's really a beautifully decored home and a place that you can just walk into, settle in, and you get everything that comes with this home. All the decor, the furniture, everything.
Local builders, Mircon Developments, are excited for whoever gets to call this home.
I'm excited to see who wins it, and anybody who wins it's really it's an amazing home. Not only the views of the back, which there's a green space, a township green space in the back, so you have no neighbors in the back, and you have this beautiful view of the North Shore Mountains.
The best room in the house? Well, according to the guy who built it, the kitchen.
It is absolutely amazing. The feature of the kitchen, but also just this is where memories get made. We spend most of our time in our kitchens, and this beautiful island, it's going to be an eating place, a place of visiting.
The ideal bungalow.
The house is a far cry from the first P&E Prize home 90 years ago. This was the house one lucky winner got to call home back in 1934. Nearly a century later, the lottery is still going strong. Tickets for the P&E Prize Home Lottery are on sale now. The draw is in September. Gabriella Panza-Beltrandi, CTV News, Langley.
That's our news for now. For CFTK-TV News, I'm Cale Maslin. Thanks for watching.